Hello, welcome to the November 12th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. We'll go ahead. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is coming through okay on my end. Bear with me just for a second. Hello, welcome to... All right, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could ask questions in the live chat field, or you can submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, it's sometimes helpful if you could indicate which version of Cubase you're running, like Cubase Elements, Artist, Pro, which also if you're running version 10, 11, and which operating system. That information is often helpful. So, and my ability to answer questions in kind of a real-time manner will probably actually be, I'm sorry, just having a call come in. But my ability to answer questions in kind of a real-time manner I won't be able to keep up. So realize that I will try to get through all the questions chronologically as possible. So as we work with this, if we could try to avoid asking the same questions over and over again, that would be appreciated. Just kind of slows down the whole process. And once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. And my primary focus is on Steinberg products. And I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself. We will have all of the topics that we discuss in the live stream today will be indexed with timestamps and pinned to the top of the comments field. It'll take several hours for that to happen after the live stream. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to set that up. We also have some other people we should thank. We have two people that serve as moderators on the live stream. They're not Steinberg employees. They're just super helpful. And I want to give a special thanks to Jazz Dude and to Agent K for their help with that. And if we have someone that's promoting something nefarious, they're really good at kind of stopping that. So we appreciate all of their efforts in making it a better community. And also another wonderful resource of information will be the Cubase Nation Discord, so you could check that out. And Jazz Dude does a lot of work compiling different videos that are really helpful, and tutorials and information that's really helpful to the Steinberg community. So special thanks to that. All right. All right, so let's go ahead through questions. All right, so we see from Uno Memento that it's going to be Father's Day in Finland on Sunday. So yeah, we have ours usually kind of the third Sunday in June in the United States, but congratulations. Happy Father's Day. All right, and we have Jason Sykes checking in from South Shields, England, where it's gray and wet apparently. So we had kind of a rainy day today. All right, so we see Michael Pierce on the live stream. We see all right, Agent K on the live stream as well. Okay, just going through. I already see some discussion of the licensing, so I'm sure we'll have questions on that. I don't have all the answers, but all right, so we see Matthew Elston checking in from London. All right, so we see Jan from Stockholm. So I just see, not sure if this is a question, but from Michael Marshall says, so chaps and chapettes, free upgrade to Cubase 12 then. So we are currently in the grace period for Cubase 12. So if you activate a Cubase 11 license, that will also activate a Cubase 12 license when it's released. All right, so we see Soren from Sweden on. We see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, so we see a question from Carlos. Hi, Greg's. Greetings from Colombia. Is there any 11.5 update this month? So Steinberg has announced that, the next major version of Cubase to be released, there won't be an 11.5 version, but it will go to 12, and that will be out early next year. So that's the latest information on that. All right, so we see Pablo on the live stream. We have John Costigan checking in from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, and we see Cedric checking in from India. Okay, so we have a question. Would you please show how to use the arranger track triggering parts via Midi and how to set up a part automatically play 3 times and move on to the next arranger part? So let's go ahead and show that. Let me see if I still have this project in my recent, yeah, okay. So we'll take a look at this project here. Okay, so let's say I have an arranger track, and if you're not familiar with the arranger track, it's its own track classification. So you can add an arranger track. So once we add an arranger track, what this allows us to do is to define different sections in a song, and we can say this will be our, a guitar solo. And we can have a nested part within a part and a part within a part defined. So this way we could play our arrangements in kind of a non-linear fashion. So we open up the arranger track. We could just activate the arranger track here. So let's say we're just going to activate the arranger track. And instead of what we can see, if we were just kind of starting brand new, we could create a new chain. We could have all of our defined positions in the song. And now we could just come over here and change the order of these particular songs. So it's not going to play back straight linearly through. It will play back in kind of a non-linear fashion. So let's say if I wanted to take this particular play order, I could come over here and we listen to it. Instead of playing kind of straight through. So we can jump around. Now, if we wanted a part to repeat 3 times, all we would have to do is say, okay, once we're here, like I could say, okay, I want to do this 1-bar chorus. And then at this point, I could just double click and we could repeat those particular sections over and over again. So we see that how many times in a row that this particular event plays in real time. So as we play. So that's how you could get a part to repeat multiple times, is just kind of double click and you'll see the number of repetitions just to the right of the name of the event. Now to trigger these in real time from Midi, you could do this through the generic remote. So let's say if I go to my studio setup and we go to add a generic remote, at this point we could come over here and we'll say, okay, let's go to this particular MIDI note message. So I'll come here, click on learn. And as I click on learn, we could just capture that particular MIDI note message. And then what we want to do is to say, we want to go to, I think we go to command and then to arranger. And then you could just say trigger arranger event 1. And then at this point, you could select another MIDI of event, a MIDI note message, and again, arranger and trigger arranger 2, arranger event 2. So you could trigger these different events from a MIDI keyboard to immediately jump to different parts of the project. Okay, so we see a question. Hi, about Cubase 11 Pro 1 month ago. So will I get free 12 Pro, or do I need to pay extra money for Cubase 12? Also, Cubase 12 needs a USB dongle, or is it internet activation? So the grace period started on November 10th. So if you did not activate the license, if you activated the license before November 10th, of this week, then that would mean that, so if you activate it beforehand, there will be an update charge from going to version 11 from 12. So any version going from version 11 to, so, you know, but if we have just from November 10th, if it's installed after until the release of Cubase 12, that would be a free update and qualify within a grace period. So the grace period has been extended with that. So, and version 12 will be using kind of a new identity management system and will not require the USB-E licensor. So. Okay, so we see a question. I got recently Yamaha A5000, but I'm wondering if there will be MIDI script for it into Cubase. So it's the A5000, is that the sampler? So you could make one quite easily. So if you just, you know, so I don't know if there will be a script. A lot of samplers don't have scripts, and I seem to remember that being the sampler. But let's say if we go to your studio menu and we go to your MIDI device manager, you know, we could say we're going to install a device. We could define a new device, you know, so there's a lot of the Yamaha workstations, but a lot of times samplers don't have presets so much, so you may not see them. I'll just check. I assume there's not one in here. Okay. So let's say if we install a new device, we'll define new. You could tell it what particular, you know, so you can say, okay, I want it to, you know, I wanted to use these particular MIDI channels on it. And we'll just give it a quick name. Okay, so now when we come over here, you could open the device, and like as you go to the patch banks here, you could create your patch banks right here, and then just kind of start entering in the particular name. So you could actually type names directly in here. So some people would also tend to use like track presets and use track presets for that, but you can kind of do it with through the MIDI device manager. So if you go to Studio, excuse me, to more options and go to your MIDI device manager, so you could do that. So, but I'll see if there's anyone in Yamaha. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I could see if there's an A5000 patch script that's floating around somewhere. Okay, so we see from John Costigan, what's the shortcut to copy the same effects to different mixer channels, like a whole drum kit? All right, so let's go to a different project. So if we had an insert effect, so let's say if I come here and I wanted to have a magneto, excuse me, I'm just going to clear my throat real quick. So if we had a magneto plugin and we wanted this particular plugin, this insert plugin applied to multiple tracks. So let's say if I'm here and I wanted to take that same plugin and apply it. So I think if we go to the track name here in the mix console and then right click, at this we could say copy the first selected channel settings. Okay. And now I could go to, and I have multiple channels selected here. At this point, we could paste settings to selected channel. So let's see if I did this right. So again, and it's critical that you kind of do it not from here, but from the actual bottom here. So copy. And we'll select. And then you could just paste, so you could paste those particular plugins across all, like multiple channels like that. So let me know if that works for you, John. All right, so I see that we have, all right, so we have Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas. Thanks for joining. All right, and we have Mark joining from Nairobi, Kenya. Thanks for joining. And we have Peter. All right, and we have Greg Malik checking in from Hawaii. So yeah, I'm looking to go vacation there maybe in the spring. So just starting to do my research. Thanks for joining. All right, and we have Murray checking in from Hanover. And we have Janarian checking in from Auckland, New Zealand at 7 a.m. So thanks for joining us and waking up really early. All right, and we have Fortune here is checking in from South Africa. Okay, so we have a question from Peter. It says, when I open a new project from scratch and record, the sound waves won't show to the right, but they do in the editor below. How do I turn them on? How I turn them on and set them on as default? Okay, so let's say if we are doing a new project. Okay, and I'm just going to add a number of audio tracks. Okay, so let's say if I just go ahead and record. So let's say if I record, so and when it says to the right, I'm assuming that this is in the project window. So, you know, if you're not seeing it on the project window, one thing that it might be is that, you know, and so it says, but they show in the editor below. How do I turn them on as default? So say, I'm not sure if it's like the visual waveform here is maybe, so if you record, you know, maybe we have the waveform here, maybe it's just kind of zoomed too much, or it's down. So, but if we double click here, but any of the sounds that, we generally see here. So, let me know if it's in kind of the center part, just so I could understand the question. But if I double click here, that would take me into like the sample editor, and I could see, I don't have a source connected to my audio interface right now, but at this point I could just double click and I could see the particular waveforms here, or if you wanted to see it in the right hand side here. But anytime that you do record, if you're looking for it in the media, like in the media bay, but they will always kind of show up in the pool window right here. So if you could give some more information, that would be helpful. All right, and we have Neurotic Nexus checking in. Thanks for joining. All right, and we have Rick France checking in from Oregon, watching. Tim Weinheimer. All right, Sir Robert from Atlanta, Georgia. Thanks for joining. All right, and we have Slovenia checking in. So we have a question. Is there any advantage using Mac instead of Windows when using Cubase Pro? So really, the program runs, equally great on both platforms. So it's really just kind of a personal preference. But there's no real advantages on either platform. There's all sorts of arguments about that, obviously. All right, we see Mandy Lange joined us. Thanks for being a part of the live stream. All right, so we see from Tim Weinheimer, tell us the latest on the non-dongle license. Thanks, great. Okay, so Steinberg has this week announced a new identity management system, so that future versions won't be reliant upon the USB e-licensor, and you'll be able to kind of sign in, and it's going to basically, it'll initially kind of start off as it'll work for 30 days. And, and within 30 days, you would need to be online for it to kind of check, and it will do it kind of seamlessly in the background. And I haven't really worked with the system yet, but this is what I've read, which is kind of publicly available. So there is a lot of, parts of the program that do dongle calls, like to the e-licensor to kind of check for that. So so they're in the future versions, they won't be reliant on the e-licensor because the code, kind of the source code of the program, it has to be, significantly modified. I think we may see some performance increases as a result of that. But it will, as you kind of start Cubase, if you have an internet connection, that will just kind of do the verification for you, and you'll be able to run it on 2 different systems. If you have I'm replacing a motherboard, you could basically deactivate one of the systems and activate it on another system. So you could have it on a desktop and a laptop simultaneously and be running your Cubase license on either or, but I don't think at the same time. So this way, people that are mobile won't have to worry about losing their USB key. And I think it'll be a good system. We know it's going to be different and there will be changes, but one of the things that's been, tough for the people at Steinberg to deal with is, all of the license server outages that have been going on. And, so at that point, we wanted to have a much better experience for customers where they could try out different trial versions without having to have a USB e-licensor, and to make it more approachable and, you know, very similar to how you may activate your operating system. So, you know, I think it'll be a much better system overall. Realize that, you know, for, you know, people that have set up their systems for Licensor to freely kind of move back, it's not going to take your version of Cubase that you have on Licensor, and it's not going to deactivate that. It's not going to stop working. So that will continue to work. And we will kind of be doing this as new versions are released. So, you know, I think we'll see it in Dorco first, followed by Cubase, and then maybe Nuendo. And as new generations of the programs are being developed, they'll be kind of developed under the new license management system. So at that point, you know, it will be a gradual process. So people could kind of work into the system and get more familiar with it. But I think it's going to be a really positive thing. Especially for a lot of people that won't even, you know, entertain the possibility of running Cubase just because of the USB licensor. And who knows if we'll have USB ports common on computers in like a USB-A format in the future. So like we used to have parallel port dongles, which are very common on Windows platform, and now parallel ports are completely gone as well. We used to have ADB ports on the Macintosh platform, and that port is no longer available as well. So that's a little bit of information, but you know, please feel free to ask more. All right, just reading through comments. All right, so we see that Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas is on the live stream. All right. So just seeing question, do we know the MSRP to move from 11 to 12? So currently no pricing or details on what's going to be in the next version have been announced, but it hasn't been announced, but I think it'll be in line probably with what it has been in the past. Right, just reading through. Okay, reading through more comments. So we see lots of discussion on the new licensing. So you just see from John Costigan saying, thank you, Greg. I had a brain freeze up about the effects copy and paste. So yeah, it happens. So just see from Neurotic Nexus just saying, so you will one day lose the opportunity to run older Cubase versions in parallel. So, you know, the older versions will just utilize a USB licensor. New versions will use the new Steinberg licensing system. So you can still run it in parallel. All right, so we see a question. What's the best solution to turn MIDI into wave straight into the project with effects and tails? So I think probably the easiest way to do that is just using the render in place. So let's say if I have just like an electric piano part here. So if I wanted to, I could select either the track or the event. And then when you go to render in place, you just go to the render settings. And then at this point, we could, choose to have the complete signal path. We could choose our tail that we could add in bars and beats and seconds. We could add our tail size. So, we could have the dry without effects. We could have the inserts, EQs, and channel strip. We could add the send effects and add the send effects and master effects if you wanted to. So now I could just, and then once this is done, I could choose to mute the source events. So I could just say, okay, let's just render that one event. And you could do multiple events simultaneously. And then you could just have that rendered with the effects with tail. So once again, just go to the edit menu to render in place. And you could do this not only with MIDI, but you could also do it with audio. And here you could, again, set your tail size if needed. All right, so we have Northern Star checking into the live stream. Thanks for joining. Okay, so it just says I'm using a CPU intensive plugin. Anything I can do in Cubase, as long as one of the things that you could do if you're, is just to render the plugin to the file. If it's going to be something that's, used kind of extensively throughout the mix, you could also just come over here to the, one of the things that can always help with CPU performance is if you go to the studio setup in the studio menu and go to select the audio interface, and you may have to click on the control panel and try increasing the buffer size. But, it's very easy to kind of render in place the audio. We could also export if it's like a super complex reverb that's kind of killing your system, you could also do your export audio mix down, and you could render the effects track and have that automatically choose to create an audio file and have that automatically placed directly in the project as well. So there's a number of ways of dealing with CPU intensive plugins without having to buy a new computer. So. Okay, so I just see this may be from our earlier question. It says, yes, the waveform is not showing in the project window. So let's come over here. I'll just check. So, if you don't see the waveform here, often what you could do is just go to the pool window, and let's say you select the audio files, and then there's probably going to be a generate thumbnail cache. I have these like the thumbnail caches. So try selecting the events in the pool, and you get to the pool from the media menu to open pool window, and try to select generate thumbnail cache, and then it should probably redraw the waveform. And also, just check to make sure like the size is, you know, it's not so small that the waveforms just aren't showing up. And if you do, you know, sometimes you could also come over here, and I think if you do Alt or Option plus G or H, you could zoom on a waveform. Excuse me. So maybe it's just kind of zoomed, like out of scale. So check some of those different options as well. All right, we have Mikhail checking in from Sweden. Okay, so we just see a comment from Peter just saying, I noticed that when you, Greg, create a new project and add tracks to it, said tracks are already set to colors. So if we come over to their preferences, and then I think if we go to user interface and we go to track and mix console channel colors. So when we go to auto track channel color mode, you could just, you know, come over here and just say use the previous track color plus 1. And then you could, as we go to add tracks, it will automatically, so say I do a new project and I go to add tracks. They'll automatically be colored. And if I turn that preference off, which I think is the default state where it says use default color, that when I go to add tracks, let's say I'll just add tracks here. Sorry about that. That they'll probably all be gray. So just again, go to preferences and user interface to track and mix console channel colors, and just I usually have this set to use previous track channel color plus 1. All right, Michael Pierce is saying to give the like button a gentle prod. So it's always good. Allows us to continue to do these live streams. Okay, so we see a question from Benny. Hey, Greg, thanks for the help. How do I get 5 different instruments in Contact 6 to end up on different tracks in Nuendo 10? So I don't have Contact on. I could show you kind of probably this similar thing using Nuendo, so or using Hallion rather. But let's come over here. So I'm going to add an instrument track. So let's say I'll just add Hallion 6. And by default, this will automatically show up as being a stereo. So let's say, okay. Okay, so if I wanted to come over here, we could see in our VST instrument rack, you'll see this little drop-down menu. And then you could choose to activate outputs. So I could just say, okay, I have all of these outputs. And as I click on that, we can see that when we go to the outputs here, that they will just show up in the mix console. So that's how we could do it. And once we have the particular instrument here, so within Contact, I'm sure that there's a way that you can go to the particular, to the particular instrument and be able to route each of these particular instruments to different outputs directly there. So that's how you should be able to have multiple outputs from your VST and then be able to route that to different outs in Cubase. So from the instrument rack that you have, you may have to activate the outputs first. So give that a shot. Okay, how many VST instruments we get with Cubase 11 Pro inbuilt? All right, so with this, you're gonna have Groove Agent SE. You'll have Hallian Sonic SE, Loop Mash, Mystic, Pad Shop, Prologue, Retrolog, Spectre. So those are the instruments that you get with it. But even if you go to Hallian Sonic SE, we could come over here and you could have different instrument sets like Flux and, you know, other instruments that kind of run directly within Hallian Sonic SE. And there's some, you know, additional ones that are sold here. But here you could have, we could think of this as kind of more of an instrument playback, like an engine playback. So, you know, we could consider like, you know, like almost like a Rompler, kind of like a motif 1080 kind of, where you have, you know, samples that would be triggered, but there's also synthesis capabilities here. So those are the instruments you get with Cubase 11 Pro. So just saying, Michael Pierce just requesting more activations. So, but, you know, I think that you could, you know, under the new, so it just says, so says a lot of us rather like the dongle. It's so useful in a pro space. At the very least, can Steinberg give us more activations? 2 is nowhere near enough. IK give 9. So again, you know, my understanding from reading the FAQ is that, you know, it could be 2 at once, but you could dynamically pick which computers are active and inactive. So it's not, you know, you could run on multiple computers, but 2 can have the license active at once. That's my understanding from reading the FAQs, but I'll pass on the feedback. All right, so we just see, why was local undo taken away? So I think, you know, all of the undo history that we are kind of used to working with is all there. So I'm not sure what local undo is, but, you know, if you come over here and, you know, move different parts, adjust the volume, split, erase, you know, it's all still unlimited levels of undo and redo. And even if we wanted to go to the mix console, there's going to be kind of its own dedicated undo history for the mix console. So I don't think any local undos have been modified or changed in any way. So if I just wanted to come adjust, like, you know, the mix console stuff, or just Control Z, you know, or Control Shift Z for unlimited redo. So if I now have moved different parts around all over the place and move this, you know, we could just go to the edit history, and these are all still viable. So I don't think that there's any particular changes with the undo, and I don't think it was taken away. But if you could let me know if I'm misunderstanding, just let me know. All right, so we see a question. I have 17 instruments in Contact and would like to connect them separately to a MIDI channel, but in Cubase you only have 16 differently numbered MIDI channels. So that's how the MIDI specification is. It's set for 16 MIDI channels. So I'm sure that Contact, and I'm not a Contact expert, but I'll show you how it's done and it's probably a very similar thing. But let's say if I go to Hallian here, that, Hallian can have 64 MIDI channels. So basically it's 16 MIDI channels per port. But when we go to a particular, output port, so let's say if I come over here to this, we could see that, as we add a sound, we could say, we have port A 1 through 16, port B 1 through 16, port C. So here we could have 64 different MIDI channels. So it's not a limitation of Cubase, it's just a limitation of, the MIDI specification has 16 MIDI channels per port, but you could probably have multiple ports working inside of Contact like you can in Hallian, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so we have a question. Are mix snapshots saved within Cubase, and how many snapshots can we do? So I think we could do 8 different mixer snapshots. Let's go ahead and take a look. So let's say if I wanted to come here, and at this point we could, click and take a snapshot. So let's adjust different parameters here, and this could be for, any of the parameters that we want. So let's take snapshot. All right, and I'll just, so it looks like 10 different snapshots. So this will be stored within the project. So if we now have moved with this, and I say, okay, I just want to go back to snapshot 2. At that point, we could just say, we could just, recall that particular snapshot. So I could just say, okay, let's go back to mix snapshot 2 and hit OK. And all of the settings that we had, we can update these. Now, so it's going to be just stored directly within the project. So, and it's really helpful, like if you're starting a mix and you're like, okay, I'm kind of starting from scratch. And sometimes you may build up a mix and then realize that you just kind of went down a bad path with it. So at this point, what you could do is just say, I wanted to save what I did as a snapshot, and then I could recall, I could start fresh and still kind of have all of my settings recalled. If I said, oh, I really liked, the kick drum better in my first mix, but I love everything else I built up in the second mix. And then you could recall, specific channels or recall specific, whether when you go to the settings, you could just come over here and say, I wanted to, take this selected channel only, and I liked its EQ more so than the others. So I could recall just the EQ from snapshot 2 on my kick drum or whatever. Now, and while we're here, we had another question of, why don't the mixer snapshots include automation? So, just kind of like a still camera doesn't necessarily take video or film, pictures. It's kind of a different process. So, so I would tend to work with the mixer snapshots kind of before getting into a lot of automation. Just because, it's the automation is not carried over with the snapshot. So the snapshot is, taking a static picture of the state of all the settings of the mix console. But it's not necessarily going to carry over the automation as well, because it is just kind of, a particular state at a moment in time that's preserved, but it's not going to carry the automation over, which is dynamically changing. So. All right, so we just see any news of what upgrades will be in 12. So none have been announced, and I wouldn't anticipate any. a hearing of any new features until it's released. So. Okay, so we just see question, can a playlist be created as tutorial for very beginners so everyone gets benefited? So I'm not sure if you want a playlist of tutorials or a tutorial on playlist. But, you know, there's lots of, you know, like how to do your first recording type of tutorials on the Steinberg website. There's also, I'm sure if you go to the Cubase Nation Discord, that there's, I think, a tutorial series. I think it's, he does wonderful tutorials. Did it on Hallian, but I think he has some on like A Man and His Song, something like that, which I believe are on the Cubase Nation Discord as well. You could check some of those out, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding, if you want to see something on playlist, which will be like our track versions. So, all right, so we have Tech Talk with Sean checking in from India. Thanks for joining us. So I just see, is there a way to use Retrolog 2 in standalone mode with the version that came with Cubase 11? So I think the version that comes with Cubase 11 is going to just be tied directly to the Cubase 11. But you could just have a very simple project. But I think if you purchased it as separately or as part of the Absolute 5, that at that point it could run standalone outside of Cubase. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we have Sergo checking in from St. Petersburg. Thanks for joining. All right, so the question, will it be possible to run older versions of Cubase with new online licensor also? So it's going to be kind of two separate systems. So the older versions will be running off of the e-licensor, and the newer versions going forward from 12 on will be on the new Steinberg License Manager. All right, so we just see, Greg, to which address should the bug report be sent? So, you know, I could pass it on if you want to send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or I think there's kind of, you could also communicate via the official Steinberg forums, but you could send it to me and I'll make sure to pass it along. All right, and we have Alexander checking in from Moscow. Thanks for joining. All right. So we just see a question from Tech Talk with Sean. What if there are two users and two machines using Cubase and Nuendo? Example, one person uses Cubase and one person uses Nuendo. Both people use two machines depending on availability. So I'm just trying to picture the scenario. But, you have, each of the licenses could, if you have a Nuendo license and a Cubase license with a new system, they could be on both machines. And, as long as they're not being, run simultaneously, it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we just see what is the difference between MIDI clock and MIDI timecode and MIDI sync settings. So when you're working with, let's say we go to the project, destination. So some devices, like a lot of times if we were synchronizing Cubase to an analog tape machine or to a video deck, that would be sent over via MIDI timecode. So that would kind of interpolate the SMPTE timecode or timecode information into MIDI information that we could derive the timing of. So often when synchronizing Cubase, like the old days, people would synchronize the sequence, they would stripe SMPTE timecode or MIDI timecode onto a track of the tape machine, and then that would be the timing reference that Cubase would synchronize to. Now, MIDI clock is often used for drum machines and maybe hardware sequencers. So, and MIDI clock can have the different tempo patterns, like different tempo information, so that when you start playing, you could synchronize other external sequencers with Cubase. So a lot of external sequencers and drum machines don't synchronize to MIDI timecode, but synchronize via MIDI clock. So generally when you're synchronizing Cubase to an external tape machine, MIDI timecode is used. When you're synchronizing external sequencers and drum machines to Cubase, then you'd use MIDI clock. So my chat field just jumped on me. Let me see. Okay, so I think I'm... Okay, so we just see, if possible, can you show how to sync video in Cubase to score, mark scenes, etc.? Thanks. Okay. Okay, so I'll just do new project. And I'll just add a video. I'll just start by importing a video. Okay, so let's say we're watching our video here. I'm just going to move this earlier in time. Okay, so let's say as we're working with the video, Okay, so let's say I'm watching the video. So we could just open up the markers track here. So let's say, so this is often what people do. Like if you want to find out like, different scenes, let's say we're watching the video. You can say, okay, I just want to drop a marker there. All right, so as we watch our video, you can say these are different scenes that we may want to hit. All right, so we have kind of Hamburg, Germany here, beautiful city. Okay, I went transition. There's new opera, the new symphony hall. All right, there's the harbor. Okay, we're in a club, so I'm gonna drop a marker there. Okay, there's the Steinberg office. Okay, now we can see the studios and developers at Steinberg. You see Nuage. Everyone's happy. It's all pre-COVID. All right, so let's say we'll want to drop a marker there. All right, that's Florian. He brings us all wonderful VST instruments. Okay, so you see kind of the office pod there, playing foosball, doing sound design, happy employees, all playing music, looking out. Sense of humor. All right, so let's say we've now looked at this video, and at this point, we've done our, different markers. We could come right over here and label these, like just in a description. So if I just wanted to come right over here and say, okay, marker 4 is, this is what's going on. These markers could also be colorized differently, independently. Now, one of the things, if I wanted to say, if I, because often when the video editors are editing video, they may not actually, think of the bars and beats. So let's say from this point here to this point to this marker, I wanted 8 measures of musical data. So we could go to what we call the time warp tool. And I could say, measure 17 starts right there. And I want measure 26 to go right here. And now what this will do, we could just see this little number up here. This is the tempo. So now I could fit 8 even bars of music between those 2 points. So you could just kind of find your markers here in the video and then just say, okay, from here to here is going to be two measures of music, or, and I could just adjust. And as we do this, I'll add a tempo track so you could see kind of what's going on. I could say, okay, I need measure 31. Let's say I need measure 5 to be here. And I need that to be 8 numbers between those markers. So it's just adjusting the tempo so that you could adjust the video and have, quickly map out tempos to the particular scenes in the video. So let me know if that's helpful or what you're kind of looking for. All right, so we just see what's new in Cubase 12. So we won't be able to share anything until it's released. So it's going to be, in the future. So, you don't have to, you're probably not going to find out. I can't really share because I'm under, I'm probably under a non-disclosure agreement, but all right, so we just see external live tap tempo, MIDI clock, please. So hang on just 1 second. I just have a call I need to take. Hang on. All right, sorry about that. So I just see external live tap tempo for MIDI clock, please. You know, so a lot of times, you know, you could just do, you know, there is a tap tempo, but it may not automatically, you know, just, you know, come, you know, to synchronize, you know, multiple devices and to audio, kind of just doing, you know, so, but if you wanted to do a quick tap tempo beforehand, I mean, you could just click on tap tempo and hit your space bar. And then once you have that value, you could put it at the tempo track start or at the selection start, but it may not automatically send out the tempo changes directly to devices. And a lot of devices may not synchronize that way. All right, so I just see, hi bro, I just bought a Cubase CMC controller app on my Samsung Android phone. It's not connecting to my PC. Note, I'm using Windows 10. So I think if it's a CMC controller app, that's not a Steinberg thing. So, you know, so we make the CMC controllers and they still work in Windows 10, but we never did an app. So it could be that someone has kind of made a CMC app, or an app that mimics the behavior of a CMC controller. So you may have to check with them, but you know, that's not a Steinberg product. So. All right, so we just see looking for a way to select all muted objects like you can in other programs. Any way to do it in Cubase. All right, so let's come back to this project here quickly. Okay, so we might be able to do this with the project logical editor. So let's say I have a number of muted events here. Okay, so let's try going to our project logical editor and we'll say select, and we'll say media type is equal to, or we could probably even just say container type is going to be equal to event. And we want to choose the property is set to event is muted. So now if I come here, let's see if I apply that and then delete. So you could do it just like that. So, you know, give that a try. So just make a project logical editor preset under function to select, and then container type is event is equal. You want to say equal to event, and property set is event is muted. So give that a shot. All right, so we're just seeing Northern Star just saying, here's an example. Each MIDI event had its own undo universe. Let's say I made a change to violins and then violas. So, you know, it's going to be the undo history. And, you know, I've had other people mention this. I never remember it being like, you know, per the event. I'm not doubting that it might have been. I've had a couple other people saying this, but I never remember it doing that. I just remember kind of since you know, at least since Cubase SX, I believe that it's always been kind of global for the undo history. All right, so we see from Michael Pierce says, I did not know about the MIDI ports in Hallian. Nice revelation of the day. So yeah. All right, so we just see how to decrease / increase the brightness of all colors in Cubase 11 Pro. Thanks. So if you kind of come over here, so a lot of it could be, you know, like could be on an individual monitor basis. But if you wanted to go, let's say, to the user interface under preferences, and then you could go to color schemes. So if you wanted to change, like, you know, the focus color for, you know, different parts, or the project editor background, if you want that really dark, you could change a lot of different elements here just by kind of clicking. And then for cycle region grid lines, so you could try to adjust directly there and see if that will do kind of what you want. So again, go to preferences and color schemes, and I'll just apply the defaults there. Okay, we see Jeff Sabelski is number 56 on the likes, so thanks for that. All right, so we see Cedric has to check out because it's, I think, probably very late in India. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we just see a question, how to create colors. So if we go to the project, you'll see the project colors setup. And then if you just double click on the color itself, then you could create and come up with your own colors very easily. And if you wanted to come over here, you could also say, I believe it'll default maybe to 16 colors. And if you want Cubase to automatically do this, where you could just say, I want to go to 32, number of basic colors with 4 different color tints, and you could have 128 colors available just like that. All right, so we just see I just see a comment, colors in the mixer channel, like how to do that. So if we want to know how to do that, we could go, again, this is the preference, go to user interface and go to track and mix console channel colors. So at this point, we could choose to colorize our channels. So, or if you wanted to colorize folder tracks or tracks. So now when you're in kind of the full mix console, you know, let's say if I just wanted to come here and we look at the full mix console, we could have colors. Let me just do it in a more recent, more contemporary project here. So once again, you just kind of come right here. Then you could have the full color scheme, but if I disabled that, we go to preferences and say, okay, we want the mixed console channel colors, so they could be kind of not with the track colors, but again, say mixed console channels and hit apply, and then you could easily kind of see the color schemes that you've defined in your project window in the mixed console. Okay, so I remember reading one question, maybe I missed it, but was how to fix velocities. So the question was like how to fix velocities for drum parts. So there's a couple different ways. So let's say, like if I have just a bunch of notes here, and I wanted to, fix their velocity. Okay, so let's say I had velocity curves here. So, and this, I'm not sure if this question will come up later, but I just remembered reading it and just thinking. So if I wanted to come here, I could select all the notes, just Control Command A. And if I go to velocity, I could say, okay, let's make it, 99. So I will just come here. All right, so I could kind of increase, but if I hold down like the control key, so let's say I have all sorts of varying velocities and I want it to, have all of the velocities fixed, I can hit Control A. And if you go to just the velocity line here, like say, let's make it all 64 and hold down Control or Command. They can now all be just kind of fixed to the particular velocity level just by doing that. So you could do that. And I see, is there a way to make a custom velocity curve for a keyboard? So if you wanted to do this, for keyboards, you could try to, often the keyboard itself, will kind of handle that. But let's say if we have a MIDI part, you could go to under the MIDI modifiers, and then here we could actually do velocity compression, so that if you wanted to expand the velocity that's coming out, but the keyboard itself, if it's only outputting one velocity, there's not too much for Cubase to work with, but you can have like different velocity presets and kind of change velocities. But if it's just a fixed velocity, it may not be able to work with like velocity compression so much. But if you let us know like what exact keyboard it is, that would be helpful, because most keyboard controllers will have like a velocity curve. All right, so we have Luca checking in. All right, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, how can I change the color of the range selection tool? Looking to make it darker, thanks. So I'm not sure if it's the tool that is the color or maybe the range selection. So if it's like the range selection, like, what's going on is, again, if you get to the color schemes and you get to... Let's see if it's... Yeah, so I don't see, I thought that there's like the active range might be in here. So let me just see if I do that, but it doesn't look like it's applicable for the range tool. So, but if you could let me know if it's the actual tool or the range selection. So just kind of highlight it to make it a little, you know, more obvious depending on the particular color scheme. So we can see some of this stuff, but I don't see like the range tool way of changing that. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we have Charles K on the live stream. Thanks for joining. So I just see the question again about is there a shortcut to apply equal velocities to drums? So another method of doing this, so let's say if I just want to take all the drums in the logical editor. So let's say if we come here to our Midi menu and we go to logical editor presets, I think there's one that's going to be like fixed velocity. See if there is, but we'll just show you how to make one. So we can say, okay, we want to transform type is equal to notes, and we'll say value 2, which is the velocity of a note. We want, so we'll say value 2, and then we want to set to fixed value. So now I could take all this and say I want all the velocities to be 65. I want them all to be 88. And you could adjust there accordingly using the logical editor. All right, so we have Nick checking in from Essex in the UK. Thanks for joining. All right, so we're just seeing kind of question again about the velocity, make a custom velocity curve for a keyboard. So let me know. Again, I know you maybe kind of the same question as before, but if you could let us know what keyboard it is. But if the keyboard doesn't really, is only, every time it's sending a MIDI message, it's, and another thing that you might be able to work with is if we come over here to the MIDI part and go to the input transformer, and here you could do stuff with velocity range as well. So you could transform, we could take value 2 and say I just wanted to, I just want to take value 2 and let's say, make it bigger by 24. Like if you have a MIDI controller, like I think the original DX7 would only go from velocities to 0 to 100. So, or you could say, multiply value 2. So we'll say value 2, and then you could say, you want to take value 2 and multiply by 1.27, and then you could take a MIDI DX, like a DX7 controller, and have it, go from, instead of 0 to 100, 0 to 127 on input. So. All right, so we just see when does high DPI kick in. I have 2048 by 1152 24-inch screens, and I assume they are not seen as high DPI displays, so the setting never allowed any effect, or does it only matter if you scale larger than 125%? So, it could, first off, make sure that, so generally if you wanted to, basically we could think of high DPI as often as kind of doubling up on the pixels. So, where like I could look at this screen and for every single pixel of this resolution, there's 4 pixels for, increased resolution. And if you're doing this on Windows, come over, make sure that when you go to the Cubase preferences under general, that you have enable high DPI checked, and then you could scale within the application. So if you don't actually have the enable high DPI checked in Cubase, then Cubase will not be running at high DPI scaling. So. All right, my timeline jumped on me. So. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to add chord track parts of the song to the score without notes? Need to send to musicians only the musical chords? And if yes, is it possible to add the lyrics to this tabs? So generally the lyrics are going to be kind of assigned to, particular, so, with notes, but you could enter in text. So let's take a look at it. Okay, so let's say we go to this project here. Okay, so here we have a chord track. So I could just add a complete empty part. So let's say I'm just going to add a Midi part here. Okay, so now I'm just going to take that empty part into the score editor. Okay, we will come over here. Let's get to the score editor and let's go to page mode so we can see this. And then I'm going to go within the score editor. We could choose to come over here and under advanced layout, we could just say show chord track. So that's kind of really all you have to do with that. And let's see if we could put lyrics in without. So if I wanted to just kind of, so we could add text within this if we wanted to for lyrics, but if we add the lyrics here, the lyrics will be actually kind of tied and associated with the particular notes. So once again, all you have to do is, create just an empty blank part, go into the score editor, and then go to advanced layout and then say show chord track. So, and then that will populate the chord track, and that will be a very easy chord track for musicians to follow, and many musicians are very adept and very used to seeing that. Okay, so we see a question, how to select multiple instances, bars in a track and Control X them with the range selection tool all at once. So let's say if I have multiple parts here, and I have my range, I'll just make this a little larger. So let's say I grab my range tool, and then once I have that range selected, just hit delete, and that will delete the range, so you're not, so that range may, not be aligned perfectly with events, but, so I could say, okay, I want to take this range, from the middle. So it's not deleting the actual events, it's deleting everything that's in that particular range. So you may have some stuff, but, so that's how you could do it. So just kind of select multiple parts and then just delete or backspace, and that's really kind of all you have to do for that. We see the Jazz Dude had a 59 Corvette. That's pretty cool. All right. All right, wonderful that Jay from Connecticut's on. Apparently he has 59 Corvette in his midlife crisis. So it's not a bad way to have a midlife crisis. All right, so we just see I'm having some issues trying to use Very Audio. Can you show me the correct way on how to use it? All right, so I'm going to take my vocal file here, and I'll just double click. And usually when I do Very Audio, I go into the larger, the full screen edit window. And then I will click on Very Audio. And at this point, it will, if it hasn't done already, it will do an analysis of the particular parts that you're working with. So if we come here. So at this point, we could have two different tools. I prefer to see the show all smart controls. So at this point, this gives us some more options. I will come over here. Let's just make this a little larger. So as we are working, so, if we wanted to do some quick tuning, so probably excuse me, the two most common ones, if you grab the top center, you could straighten the pitch, and that helps regulate vibrato. If you wanted to select a number of notes and kind of center them to being in tune, you could just grab the bottom center part, and you could just kind of, do a lot of that, right there. So if this note was a little flat or sharp, if they sang the wrong pitch, just simply move it. If we wanted to tilt particular notes, if we go to the upper corners, we could just have like the pitch go up or down. And if we wanted to also just, like when we're working on transition notes, so let's say I want to take this note here, like this note, and I wanted to adjust the pitch, but not necessarily affect kind of the transitions going in. I could just say, okay, I wanted to grab these little small, I'll make it a little bigger to see. We'll see these little small triangles in the upper corners, and now I could straighten the pitch without affecting kind of the transitions of notes. You could also say, okay, I wanted to tilt this particular part here where someone maybe, came in sharp, and I could just, affect just the entrance or the exit of notes for tilting. I could set that amount by moving the diamond in the center. If I wanted to adjust the formants or the volume on individual clips, so if someone just had like a little bit of a lip smack or something like that, and we could also adjust kind of where the events start and end just right there. So that should probably get you started. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see David Griffiths is back in Wales, just back from his cycling trip in Spain. It sounds like a lot of fun. Hope you had a great time. We see just a great point from Tech Talk with Sean. Just says we see some discussion on displays. It says when picking up a display, be aware of the refresh rate and response time. TVs usually have lesser refresh rates and slow response time, which is not ideal for computer usage. It's really annoying. One of the displays I got stuck with at many trade shows was like an LG that you couldn't adjust. It was like 40 milliseconds of latency on the screen. It was really annoying. So that's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up, Sean. See, Michael Pierce says, Nuage, there's something I can't afford. Can we have one as a giveaway, Greg? So we gave one away last week on my birthday, but I think you stepped away to do tutoring. So sorry about that. That was mean. But yeah, it is a wonderful controller. It's probably the best controller on the market. Okay, so we have question. Where did you click to show up the marker list in the menu to rename them? So if you click on the marker tracks and then just click on the E for the edit channel strip, I think it's also is it Control or Command plus M for marker. So just kind of come right over here, click on that E, and then you could rename the markers there, and the names that you type in will automatically show up in the marker track. See, Michael Pierce is stepping out for a little bit. So everyone tell him that he missed a free Nuage today. All right, so we see Pete Franco just saying, I need to import multiple practice tracks for multiple songs, and the tracks are all MP3s. Can I reference them from their location without importing them and converting them to WAV files? So generally, anytime that you're going to take an MP3 file, and import it into Cubase, it's automatically going to, convert it to a WAV file, because we think that you would probably want to be able to edit the file. So generally you can't really edit MP3 files, and if you want to do editing, you take it into a standard WAV file and do edits. So as they're imported, they are going to be converted to WAV files. But I'm sure that there's other tools that you could do that. For just, but most of the time a tool would just kind of play it back. So if you're going to actually put it into a Cubase project, it makes sense for it to be, but you could just, play the files from the media bay as MP3s without converting it. Okay, so just see question for external live tap tempo. I tried to map Midi the tap tempo button in Waves H delay, but didn't manage for some reason. So, a lot of times once you have the tempo map, in Cubase, so if you don't need to do, like I could understand maybe for performance where you maybe want that, but, Cubase has wonderful tempo detection capabilities. already, and all the delays and will be tempo synced to the delay. You could change the tempo in real time, but maybe not through like a tap tempo. So just see, probably Cubase should add a mappable tap tempo to the Steinberg delays. So like when I come here to this project, let's say,
that was okay.
So I'll take the vocal here.
Guess all along I was so naive.
Now I'll add a delay.
Now you're packing boxes ready to leave. Our musical history laid out on the floor.
So let's say I put a quarter note delay.
I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours.
So this will automatically, once you have this sync turned on, and whatever. So let's say if I come here, I'm just going to put the vocal into musical mode here. So
all along, I was so naive.
And if I change the tempo,
now you're packing boxes ready to leave.
My delay will
Our musical history laid out
will
on
automatically
the floor.
speed up to match whatever
I've got to
tempo.
choose what's mine and what's yours. 'Cause now you're asking Beatles or Stones. Something about that just.
So once you have it on tempo sync, whatever tempo you have and whatever tempo you're playing, you could just change the tempo kind of real time on the fly for your projects, and the delays will automatically follow if it's in tempo sync mode. So. You see Gareth is on the live stream, and he's saying, uh-oh, Greg has got the Project Logical Editor out. So, all right, so we see a question on the meters in the mixing console. How do we set the meters to show the K system? For example, K12 or K20, Windows 10 with Cubase 11. So, currently it's just going to be normal, the selectable meters are going to be in the meter display here. But we have just, standard digital scale here, and the master meter you could adjust accordingly here. So, but these meters would be in just regular digital scale. So these are kind of fixed, but you could adjust, to have, different meters if you wanted to on each channel through like supervision, or just, solo the track and see the different meter represented here. So. All right, so we see from Tech Talk with Sean, but that he only wants the delays to be synced to the tap without changing the song tempo. So generally, most people want their delays to be in sync and not out of sync. So, but that's kind of the intention of what they're doing. All right, and we see JVI has made the live stream. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we see from Gareth, could you go through the chord track options and chord editing options in the Midi editor? Okay, so let's say if I was looking, okay, so if we wanted to add chord tracks, so like here, I will, we add a chord track, and, we could just, place different chords in. So you could just double click if you wanted to define the chord manually. You could do this, so you could get very creative with your chord spellings if you wanted to. You could also, if you don't know what chord it is that you're actually, want to use, we could just click on MIDI input here. And if I just play just random chords, it will, I'm just throwing my hand down on my MIDI controller, it will automatically just kind of tell you what chord you played. So if you can't figure out what the chord spelling, or if you don't know your theory, you could do that. Well, now while we're in a particular part, let's say I wanted to go to the piano part of this piece, and we're looking at it. One of the things that was added in version 11 was the inclusion of chord tracks. So we can now see like the chord track markers all directly here within the MIDI key editor. So and so once you're here, you could double click and you have the kind of the same editing paradigm here. So you have the same functionality for the chord track within the piano roll editor as you do in the key editor as you do from the project window. So we could just come right over here and put new chords in, double click to open and change the chords as well. So let me know if that makes sense for you. Okay, reading through more comments. Okay, so we see how to change the visualization of stereo panning like yours, Greg. So you may have noticed, like sometimes when you go to a project, you may see that the panning is larger, and that's if there is a 5.1. So it doesn't really give you any more functions, but if I go to my audio connections here and go to outputs, and I add a 5.1 bus. So now that I do that, now my stereo panners will get bigger. So just because we've introduced kind of a surround bus, a surround group, or something like that, or surround effects channel sense. So that's how you could do it. So if I wanted to go to my audio connections again and remove the bus, you'll see that the panning will kind of revert back to probably what you were used to. So I'll just remove my 5.1 bus and you'll see the panning will just go to the left to right. Okay, so we see from JVI, question on Groove Agent kit, binding blank pages. There are 8 possible fills in the agent/styles page, but on the pads I will only get fills 2, 3, 6, 8. How can I get the missing fills on a pad? All right, so this is, so if we look at, we'll do a Groove Agent and a Groove Agent SE. So when we come here, so Groove Agent SE, I'll get both of them open here. So why we see kind of the difference between them. So, one is with Groove Agent SE, there's only 16 pattern pads. But let's say if I come over to, I think maybe even the Simon Phillips stuff may work with this. take a quick look. So some of them you'll see. So you'll see like the SE distinction. See if I can find it quickly. So some of the presets you'll notice will have SE. I'll just look at it a different way. Okay, so let's say in this one I'll do "You Will Be Free." Okay, so let's say, and when I come here, we'll say, all right, so we'll have the "You Will Be Free" SE. So there's only 16, in the SE version, there's only 16 pads for patterns. But when we go to the full version of Groove Agent, you could have 128 pattern pads. So that's why you'll see more intros, more fills, and more patterns in the full version of Groove Agent versus the SE version. So that's why you will sometimes see some of the patterns appear to be truncated because there's only 16 patterns in the SE version that comes with Cubase, and the full version will allow you to have up to 128 patterns. So often you have more patterns to work with. Okay. All right. So just see a question from Michael Pierce. When wanting to pitch shift an audio event, I seem to remember that there's an option in the top inspector to shift by semitones or cents, but it doesn't appear for me. 10.5 Mac. All right. So let's say if I wanted to. So as soon as we come over here, you'll see transpose. This will be semitones. And then you have fine tune, which will be cents. So, but make sure that you have the event selected, and it's an audio event. So once you come over here, you'll see that the transpose will be, so let's say as we listen to this.
We played our records into the night.
So here, I'll just put it back to my original tempo here real quick. So if you wanted to just go up 4 cents, you could adjust there.
Played our records into the night.
And transpose by semitones there.
I turn it up, you wouldn't.
So the fine tune is cents and the transpose is semitones. All right, so you see a question from JVI. I have an NI instrument with a long echo and reverb. Is there any way to make the echo and reverb stop immediately and permanently? The only thing I can think of is to bounce the audio. All right, so let's see if I'll just maybe do a new project and we'll see if we can just put too much reverb on a particular sound. So I'm not sure if it's an effect that's been added or if it's part of the sample. So let's say if I wanted to come here, we'll add, just say, an instrument track. All right, so let's say I have a lot of echo on this particular sound. So there's an echo. So, if it's going to be, all right, so let's say I'm just playing along, I'll just record something here. So, so when he plays back, we're going to see that we have kind of, one note that we have an effect on. So when we go over here to the mixer, we go to the effects, we'll see that we're going to probably on, let's say if it's probably maybe even in the, but you may just have the particular effect in the instrument. So let's say if I was just kind of playing that. So, if you figure out where the actual effect is coming from. So let's say, so I can see my delay mix here. So if I just wanted to change that while it's playing, we could add more echo. Or you could just kind of automate the effects directly in there. So a lot of the, instruments will kind of have built-in effects, just like, keyboards, same concept. And you could adjust and automate the delay change there. So let's say if I would just want to automate the plugin parameters while it's going. So say, okay, it's going to start off with a lot of delay, and say the next note. So you could just kind of automate the echo within the NI instrument, and see if you do that. Or you could, just simply also just, do automation on the actual track if you didn't want it. So let me know if that makes sense. I don't know what instrument it is exactly. All right, so we see a question. I have two Focusrite interfaces that I'd like to use at the same time for more inputs and outputs. Can Cubase do this? So if the Focusrite interfaces can do it, you can. So there are a couple of ways. So generally, if it's a USB interface, most of them won't stack. Like older FireWire or PCI interfaces, you can often run multiple instances. But it's probably the driver architecture, because it's probably most of the interfaces are USB these days, the vast majority. And there's no real way to synchronize the audio between the two interfaces. So that's why often you run kind of one interface. If you need more inputs and outputs, and if you have an interface that has like ADAT digital inputs and outputs, often what you could do is you could have one interface run as kind of almost not as an interface, but you connect it into like the ADAT inputs and outputs. and that could expand the number of inputs and outputs from like 8 to 16. So if you have like ADAT, expandability, like a digital toss link or ADAT connection, you could generally run one as a USB interface and connect the other one via, toss link optical connections or an ADAT optical connection, and, get more inputs and outputs that way. All right, so we see Pete Franco just saying, this is a great way to finish up the Friday workday. Thank you so much for the streams. You're welcome. Yeah, my Friday nights always end up going to like 9 or 10 o'clock at night, so I can get all the index stuff done. Then I feel like my weekend has started. Okay, I just lost my space and just found it. Okay, so just see a question. Whenever I rename a session folder on a Mac, it makes a new folder without transferring audio files. Then the session has missing files. How can I change the name of a folder without it doing this? Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll just set up a new project here. All right, and I'm going to make a new folder. Okay, so and now I'm going to record a number of audio tracks quickly. Okay, and I'm going to record. Okay, so now that I've done this, all right, we will come over here. Let's go to my Finder. I'll go to Documents, and we'll go to this particular folder. So we say our projects. And we'll go to our Hangouts. So this is the folder that we just created. And in here is all of my audio files that I've just recorded. All right. So let's go ahead and rename that folder. Okay, so I'm going to now come over here and I'm going to, I guess I should, I'm going to save the project here real quick. Okay, so first I'm going to just save the project, and then I'll rename the folder. Okay. Okay. So let's say now we've renamed, we have the project. It's in that particular folder. I'm going to go back to my Finder window on my Mac, and we'll just call this, I'm going to rename this particular file. Okay, and we'll look and we'll have that particular project file there. I'm going to close this project. All right. And then there's all of the files right there. So it didn't seem like it had any problem renaming the folder. Didn't seem to affect it. So, you know, maybe you have to open directly from the particular, you know, so I'm not sure if you're opening it from recent projects. So let's say if I open up this from a recent project instead of from the actual file, then maybe we would get kind of, I'll just close that, and let's get to recent projects. But seems like everything is kind of working as expected. So let me know if you're maybe renaming your folder in a different way. All right, we see Jeff Sabelski's heading out to the VA, so good luck with your appointment. All right, so we see from JVI, so it says, question on an instrument track. I record 2 lanes, delete 1 lane, keep lane 2, now record on same track, 3 new lanes. How can I now glue these 4 lanes together as if they were real lanes together? All right, so let's go ahead and get this set up. All right, so say I'll just do a quick. Okay, so it's so record 2 lanes. So I'm going to put my MIDI record mode into, let's say for cycled, I'll just put it into stacked. All right, so I'll start with the high note and then mid note. All right, so I have my 2 lanes. All right, if I click on the right button, we'll see our 2 lanes. Okay, so it says, so delete lane 1. So we will. Now record on same track, 3 new lanes. All right, so let's say I'll record again. Let's say low note. Okay, so I see that I've now recorded, it says now recorded on the same track, 3 new lanes. How can I glue? All right, So it seemed like, it didn't create 3 new lanes. So I have like the next lane that's kind of automatically populated, probably because I went over just a little bit. But if you wanted to merge all of these together, let's say we close the lanes and I wanted to merge, if you grab the glue gun, I think it's Alt or Option and click, that now I could double click and I could see both notes indicated directly there. So that would take multiple parts and kind of, take the different lanes and merge them all together. So try that. Let me know if that works or if I had different behavior than you did. All right, great that Kai Wen Franklin could join. Thanks for being a part of the live stream today. All right, so just see, is there something similar to spectrogram from Reaper that's available inside of Cubase? So I'm not familiar with Reaper, but we'll take a look. Let's say I'll just jump to this project here quickly. There is kind of like a really extensive metering plugin that's available called Supervision that you'll see under Analyzer. So if you wanted to just kind of take a particular section here, you can go to audio, and I mean, you can see like a spectrum analyzer to see that, and it's kind of, maybe a little old, that's kind of early code. But let's say if I was just taking kind of a whole project here, we could go to, and I just have this, you could put on a master bus, but you could come over here and add under Analyzer. And here we have up to like, multiple meters, but if you want to see a spectrum curve or spectrum bar, if that's kind of what you want to see, and you could actually kind of see the pitch and the note. Or if you want to see spectrum intensity or spectrogram or chromogram, or if you wanted to kind of see all of these, we could come over here and say, okay, I want a spectrum bar. And then at the bottom, I wanted a spectrum curve. And let's say to the right of that, I want it to see my spectrum intensity. And then for this, we'll say, okay, let's have our spectrogram and our chromogram. So, and then if you wanted to, you could kind of change a lot of visual settings, and all of these are kind of completely scalable as well. So if you wanted to just kind of come over here and scale that as well, you could just kind of completely do that. So let me know if that's kind of what you're looking for. And hopefully that should kind of take care of that for you. So all right, so just see from Neurotic Nexus. So does the Focusrite device driver not support stacked devices? Even my old M-Audio 1010 LT driver can manage 2 or more devices, but they appeared as 1 in ASIO. So generally, it's, if it's, I think your Delta 1010 was probably a PCI card. So the PCI cards could do that pretty easily, but it's not really available on the USB audio interfaces. Okay, and I also see maybe the spectrogram was for maybe spectral editing, and if that's from our previous question, so maybe I misunderstood, but you could also just come over here, and with Cubase 11, you get Spectral Layers 1. So if you go to Audio, to Extensions, you could say, okay, let's go to Spectral Layers. And at this point, you could do all sorts of spectral editing here. So if you wanted to, let's just find something that has some more frequencies in it. So if I just wanted to take like the guitar part here, we could see more of your harmonic content. And at this point, we could say, I'll just go to the composite view, and here we could see kind of it's almost like taking the waveform and looking at it on its side. So if that's what you mean, you could do that with the included Spectral Layers 1 with Cubase 11. And we see Gareth is making a point about MIDI events not showing fine-tune, but just audio doing that. So maybe that'll help Michael Pierce out. See Kai Wen Franklin says he really wants to start adding vocals to your music, so that'd be great. So I just see from Sergo saying, is it really, Greg, that I was able to control play, stop, record with the Boss RC500 looper buttons with the MIDI? So you should be able to, anything that kind of spits out a MIDI message, you could remap those functions in Cubase. So if you wanted to go to your studio menu to studio setup and go to generic remote. So here you can say, okay, and all you have to do, even if you don't know what MIDI message is being transmitted, click on MIDI learn, hit, all you have to do is now just kind of click on whatever note that you want and then go to transport. And then you could just say, okay, device. And then you go to start, stop, fast forward, rewind, record. And you could just come right over here and assign, anything that transmits MIDI messages can be remapped for controlling transports. Okay, so we just see I purchased the Behringer BCF 2000 B control fader. I'm struggling to get it set up for CC control in Cubase 11 Pro. Please help. So, really all you have to do is, there's probably a different mode that you'll be in when either you're in, there's probably going to be two modes. One will probably be it's going to function as a Mackie control. And then you may hit a button and it's going to function as MIDI CC messages. So if you have so you may have to actually switch it between the two. So, and if you don't have that switched, make sure if you have a Mackie control, you know, try to see if it's not connected. Now, as you could set up a MIDI track, all right, and we don't even have to worry about like the input or output, but what you could do is under a MIDI insert, you know, so if it's transmitting MIDI CCs, you should be able to come right over here and go to your MIDI monitor and be able to, whatever CCs are being transmitted, you should see those CCs automatically appear here. So it's usually not what's going on in Cubase, but which mode the controller is in, because some of them will, you know, hit a button, it's transmitting MIDI CCs. And then you could just come to the MIDI monitor on a track and just figure out what exact CC is being transmitted. Okay, so I move this, it's transmitting pitch bend. I move this knob, it's 32. I move this, it's 34, 35, 36. So at that point, I could see exactly what's being transmitted. So, you know, when you put it into Mackie control, that's also sending MIDI messages, but different MIDI messages. So you have to, you know, so you could kind of determine what mode it's in, and you could set up, you know, you could probably set within the Behringer unit what MIDI CCs it is transmitting. All right. Okay, so we see question, how can we automatically find or display all frozen tracks? Okay, so let's see if we can, do a new project here quickly. All right, so let's say I will record just a little bit of audio here. All right, so I want to duplicate these two tracks, and I want and I'm going to freeze these tracks so that we know that the top two are frozen and the bottom two aren't. And we'll see if we can do this maybe in a Project Logical Editor. I'm not sure if it can happen, but let's see if it's a parameter. All right, so just take one more look to see if that's a parameter in. Yeah, so I don't know a way to automatically select, or to have tracks selected that are frozen, other than kind of visually seeing it there. Yeah, so I don't know of a way, other than to visually check. Sorry about that. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we discussed this earlier, but the question is, I heard Steinberg got rid of the dongle, so the licensor is still current and working, and as was announced, in February of last year, that they are moving to a new licensing scheme. So it hasn't been implemented yet, but there's it will be moving to a licensing scheme that's not based on the USB licensor dongle. That will be kind of software identity management. So okay, so we see, can you send clock from Cubase via USB to a synth so that you can, for example, use the arpeggiator from your synth in time with your click? So, if you, as you, if you have a USB MIDI driver that's connected to your synth, then all you have to do is come over here. So let's say if I had it going out of my UR24C, I could go to my project synchronization setup. And then all I have to do is, go to destinations and say MIDI clock destinations is going out of my UR24C port. And then that could automatically sync up the tempo and the clocks and the arpeggiators from other, from other devices. So, but you would need a USB MIDI driver to get to the instrument, or MIDI interface to get, to that device, so most instruments been sold in the last 20 years have a USB MIDI interface built in. So yeah, it's no problem. And it's a very common thing to do. You see some discussion of preamps, and Gareth doesn't even enter a room without preamps. So it's a good way to roll. All right, so we see question. I plugged my headphones straight into my computer, and I'm struggling to have sound. What can I do? So you want to make sure that wherever Cubase is going, so if you have an audio interface, plugging it into your computer isn't going to help if you have an audio interface. So what you need to do is, depending on your audio system, you need to make sure that we have this set up for for whatever audio interface. So if you don't have an audio interface, on the Mac, you would switch to built-in, or on the Windows platform, you would select generic low latency ASIO. And often when you go to the control panel, especially on Windows, you may just have it say, send the audio out to the speakers or send the audio out to the headphones. Sometimes it will automatically switch. It'll automatically switch once headphones are connected. The speakers will get turned off. But sometimes it doesn't, and you have to manually tell it through just going into the control panel. So if you could let us know what operating system that you're running, and if you're using an audio interface, plug into the headphones of the audio interface and not the computer, because Cubase can go to your audio interface. That's the most common way, but it still could work. But you may have to physically go into the control panel and go through the Windows sound driver and tell it to send audio out of the headphones as opposed to the speakers, especially on a laptop. See Ryan just saying, thanks for the info. You're welcome. So hopefully it was helpful. Okay, so we see from Chris, first time watching, any questions allowed or only related to the project you're on? So any questions is totally user generated questions is what we sit here and answer for 4 hours. All right, we see JVI is like number 82, so that's great. Thanks. And if you do learn something or learn a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button. All right, so we see question, trying to create a techno rumble. Guides are usually in Ableton where they choose the kick track as input on a different track and put effects on that track. How can I do that in Cubase? So it sounds like they're just doing some simple side chaining. So let's see if we could show you how to do that. All right, so let's say if I come over here and I want to take like this kick and affect the snare that's going on, so that the dynamics of this synth, the bass sound, are being triggered by the particular kick track. So what we could do is, depending on the plugin, some plugins will allow you to, if I go to my compressor plugin, I could activate the sidechain, tell it to use the sidechain. So usually it's like very common in EDM, and then I select the track. So I can say I want this kick track to feed the dynamics of the compressor on the bass track. So now as we listen to it, so it just sounds like what you're describing is just simple side chaining. And once you have this set up, you could take multiple sidechain input destinations and kind of control, and it's not just for compression, but you could control EQs and delays and other plugins as well. So let me know if that makes sense. Okay, so John Costigan wants people to press the like button. We see Cubase Junkie just saying that the full version of Groove Agent is worth it. He says you get a lot of functions in the full version, like MPC type functions, like note repeats and stuff like that. All right, so I just see I use the Korg pad control. It writes automation, but while looping, new data doesn't overwrite. So it could, I'm not sure if you're writing automation or MIDI CC data, but if it's MIDI CC data, when you're writing the automation, if it's MIDI CCs, just make sure that you have this set to, your MIDI record modes. You could have it mixed or overwrite. So depending on, your MIDI record mode, so you may want to have it into replace or overwrite if you wanted to automatically so if you wanted to overwrite, so if you let us know if you're writing MIDI CCs or if you're writing like mixer automation data, that would be helpful. Okay. So just see coming from Ableton to Cubase, how can one make Cubase more like Ableton? Can you have multiple VSTs in one window, for example? And so, if you wanted to have, multiple VSTs, so they're not necessarily kind of like cascaded in one window, but you can just simply save workspaces. So let's say if you're here and you just want it to have, pad shop set up. And let's say if I added another instrument, I could come here. So like it doesn't just automatically kind of switch, but you can, like where you could just automatically go from instrument to instrument. You could, let's say if I just wanted to go to, but if you have like your different windows set up, you could just save these as workspaces. And you could call those up with different keyboard shortcuts. So say, okay, I'm here. And then I just wanted to go to bring those settings back. So, but, if you have other particular things that you want to know, just ask. It's kind of hard to, say how to make it more like another program. So, but if you let us know kind of what you want to do specifically. Okay, we see, hi Greg, Tim from Las Vegas question. I see two instances of Groove Agent, SE5 and Groove Agent 5. Are they one and the same? So, Groove Agent SE5, it comes with Cubase, and Groove Agent 5 is sold separately. So Groove Agent 5 is going to add some additional functions such as like, sampling, with sidechain input. It has the ability to run multiple agents. You get a percussion agent, more content. You get different performance modes. So, that's the one that's sold separately. And Groove Agent SE, we can think of SE as like starter edition. That is what's available inside of Cubase and part of your Cubase license. So we have, it just says, question, is there a way to activate record from a foot switch in Cubase Pro 11? The record button on my Arturia Keylab is too loud. So yeah, we could do this by going into your studio menu to studio setup. And you could add a generic remote. So once we add a generic remote, what you could do is click on select learn, and basically you want to say, okay, this will be fader 2, let's say. So we'll click here and, just hit your foot switch. So I'm just going to hit a note here instead. But it could be any MIDI message. So say, okay, so now this MIDI message will do this function. So I'm going to say, let's go to transport and just go to select device, and we want it to hit record. So now when you hit the foot switch, and make sure that we have, this MIDI input and output mapped from your controller. So that will take the controller pedal from your foot switch, and then that will turn that MIDI message into a record function in a transport. Okay, so let's see. So we have, can you shed some light on convert tracks, head tracking, and GoPro VR player commands? Okay, so let's see if it's from here. So let's say if I want to convert tracks. So let's say I have a stereo recording here, and I want to just take that particular recording and turn that stereo interlead file where we have the left and right channels together in the stereo file. And at this point, I want to go to my project, and we'll say convert tracks, and I'll say multi-channel to mono. So at this point, I'll take that, and that will automatically convert the stereo track to 2 mono tracks. When we get into head tracking, that's when we could get more into if you're working with an HRTF, like the little, almost like the virtual reality goggles. So if you wanted to do the different, like, as you move your head, where you're in kind of a, you could do immersive, immersive audio functionality. So like you could mix so that as you move your head, you like, let's say you're facing forward and you hear a car to your right, that as you move to look at the car while you're wearing the head tracking, that, and this is often typically used with like, maybe like an Oculus. So at that point, if you hear a car to your right, you move to the right to look at the car. The audio positioning of the car can automatically match what your head position is doing, and it's tracking kind of your head movement. And the VR player allows you to play back 360-degree video so that you can, as you turn around in a complete circle, that the video will line up. So that's how that works. Okay, so we just see from JVI, just says Groove Agent missing files. I'm using Groove Agent 5 full. Still can't see other fills, drum kit in question, acoustic agent, SE kit, binding blank pages. Surely there's a way of getting the missing files. So, don't load up the SE version. So if the SE version is what you're loading up, just, realize that, that's going to have fewer controls than a non-SE kit. So there may not be a non-SE acoustic agent kit, but like the kit that we showed earlier, that will give you kind of an indication, like when you can see both, you know, an SE and a non-SE version that you'll have more capabilities, but the SE won't have as many capability. You know, you have the potential for having less fills and intros and endings than a non-SE kit. Okay, just reading through some more comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great comments. Let's see where we are in time. Okay, so I'm about a half hour behind, I think. Okay, so I just see, is there a way to auto group tracks or grouping tracks using the logical editor? So we'll show you something here. All right, so I'll just do a new project. All right, so say I'll just kind of name all right, and I'm just going to colorize these all kind of all at once. Okay, and so let's say I just have some of these. Okay, so if I wanted to, you know, select tracks using the Project Logical Editor, you could also do stuff like, okay, so I'll just come here to the Project Logical Editor. So let's say I named the drum. So I could, and one of the things you could actually do is kind of set up macros as well. So let's say we'll first come over here and I want to select tracks. So I'll say container type is going to be equal to track, and I'll just say for the second, I'm going to say name. So let's say name contains drum. Okay. And we can set multiple conditions. You say kick, snare, different naming derivations as well. So let's say at this point, I want to select all tracks that have the word drums in it, or whatever word that I see that is appropriate for the setting. Now, if you wanted to group these together, what you could do is so we could actually have it trigger a macro. So interestingly, you could trigger a macro, but not a single key command. So I'm going to come over here. We'll say selected tracks to, or add group to selected tracks. Okay, so let's see. Sorry, just let me look for this function real quick. Okay, so let me just find this real quick. So okay, so it's gonna be under mixer. Okay, so I'm gonna come over here. So we'll say add group to selected, add track to selected group channel. Okay. Okay, so and what I want to do is a new macro. I'll call it selected to group, and I'm going to add this command. And now I could just say, yeah, and there is a macro for selected tracks to new folder. You can add, but I'll just come here. Just find the one we just made. So I'll just do it for here for expedition's sake. So what I could do now is, let's say I have my vocal channel selected. I can now come over here. It's going to select all the tracks that have the word drum in the name and then trigger this macro. So I could just say, okay, let's do drums, and we can name it our drum bus. And now we have everything in a folder and select it as well all at once. Hang on one second. I need to just step away for just a couple of seconds. Bear with me. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. right, reading through more comments. All right, we see that Gareth's daughter has been fed, so that's good. Okay, so we just see I'd like to have the possibility to regulate the click level. Is it possible to create a click track in the mixer with thus a fader available? Thanks so much from Rome. So thanks for joining us in the live stream. So if I wanted to, let's say, we'll just kind of start off here. Okay, so let's say I have my left and right locators set around like perhaps my song. If you go to the project and go to signature track, you can say render audio click between locators. And now you can see the audio click has been added to the project. And then it's on its own fader. So if you just want to double click and take a look at the click track, you could just have the click track automatically rendered just that way. So between the left and right locators, go to the project to signature track and just say render audio click between locators. And that'll do it for you. And once that's done, you could now come over here and just adjust on a fader the levels. All right, so we see Gareth is saying the generic remote was his revelation of the week. And it says to assign the zoom function correctly in his icon platform M+. So we see a question, electric bass instrument looking for really soft ballad rock bass. Do you have two favorites for this in the plugin for this? Asking as this is your instrument. So I do really like the electric bass plugin. I just got a company had sent me another electric bass plugin. I just thought it was that I didn't really like nearly as much, but so, check out like and this is part of the Absolute 5 as well, but the electric bass. So say we go to the Halion Sonic SE and then go to the electric bass. So there's lots of different options here. But, maybe you start with like a clean Music Man bass. That should give you some. And some of the things that makes it really kind of unique is, so you're going to have your level, but the tone knob is, very nice for doing, kind of ballady stuff. So if you wanted to do slapping, you could do that as well. And, probably just more of the sustain. You could choose different pickup configurations. So if you wanted a jazz bass or a P bass, you could just kind of come right over here and, be able to kind of pick. But I tend to think that works very well kind of in context of a mix especially. So I think it's a great choice to work with. So we see Kaiwen Franklin is kind of moved over to Wavelab from SoundForge. It's not working with Monterey. So. And we see Kaiwen Franklin likes the MIDI monitor. So, and Pablo is back from his coffee time. And we all know the golden rules. We can't talk about coffee while Greg is stuck on the live stream. So, making me all coffee jealous. So you just see, I pray Cubase 12 will not require a faster processor than my i7 2.9 gigahertz. So, my guess is that the processing would be pretty similar to what we have in current versions. Generally it's not like it's cut off. So, it could be over several different versions. So I think if you're kind of happy with your Cubase now, that the next version should be fine. Okay, so we have a question. I'm fiddling around with MIDI lanes and come across a question. If I have 5 MIDI lanes on one track and 5 MIDI lanes on another track, is it possible to get a track with 10 lanes from it? All right, so let's give it a shot. Okay, and I'm just going to duplicate this track here. And I'm just going to set my MIDI record modes appropriately. So let's say I'll do new parts. I'll do this for both. All right. My lovely composition. Gareth is going to steal it. Let me just. Sorry. I'm going to just do this one more time. So I'm going to just put it in stacked mode since I did it in record and cycle record. All right, so now we have our different lanes here. So let's see if we can move multiple ones. Yep, so it looks like you could just grab them all and kind of move them to different lanes. So I just selected the lanes here, Soren. And at this point, I just dragged it. Cubase will always kind of give you a courtesy lane. So now I could just drag those right over, and I could have my 10 lanes from 2 parts with 5 different lanes. All right, so I think we saw some moderation from Jazz Dude. Thanks for that. Okay, reading through comments here. So thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we just see how can you sidechain if the kick is muted though? Ghost sidechain. Okay, so if we wanted to do, all right, so I'll jump back to this project here. We had to sidechain. Okay, so let's come over here. Okay, so let's say if our kick is muted and we still want to do sidechain through it. So let's say we'll just take this. Okay, so so right now we have our kick is muted, so when we unmute it. All right, so often, let's take a look, see if we could do the kick, and let's get to the send, and we'll see if we move the send for the sidechain to pre-fader. So one thing you can do, because it's going to need to kind of feed that, but if you didn't want to hear, we could still send this track instead of to the stereo out, send it to no bus, and then the sidechain is still being fed, but we don't hear it. So if you instead of muting it, maybe send it to the audio output to no bus, and then you could still have the send, and that will trigger the sidechain without hearing the kick, but you still get the benefit of the sidechain at the same time. Okay, so we have a question. Can you please show me how to use the scores again? When I use Chord Track, it does not appear, won't appear, and also how to enter text. Okay, so let's jump back. I think we're on this project, so I'll revert it. Thank you for all the great questions. Okay, so I'm just going to create kind of a blank instrument or MIDI track. Doesn't even have to be routed anywhere. All right, and I want this. So I'm just going to create kind of one blank part. That's the length of the song. Select this and we go to our score editor. So we have a chord track already in the project, but I'm going to go to my score editor. Once in the score editor, if you're not in page mode, switch it to page mode. Go to Advanced Layout and show chord track. Now to add text, all you need to do is you'll see the symbols tab on the left hand side. So if you just wanted to come over here, and then you'll see under other, and then you'll see text, and then you could just type in text like as you see fit. So if I didn't close the window, you could just come over here and move the text and different text as well, or cues for musicians. So that's how you could do it. Okay, reading through comments here. Sorry for hitting my mic. All right. All right, so we have Kamal checking in from North Vancouver in British Columbia. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see from Kai Wen Franklin, Greg, is a workspace tied to a project? So when you start working in workspaces, there's project workspaces and global workspaces. So when we go to add a workspace, we could choose for it to be project-based or global. So that way, you know, if you have different instruments or, you know, different instrument combination, you want to see those particular instruments that may not be used in other projects, you could save it as a project workspace, and global workspaces can be used in any project. All right, so a question, is it possible to have plugins always open on a particular screen? Example, a third screen. So I think, you know, once the plugin has been moved over, and I only have a single screen currently in my system, but once you open up a plugin, if you drag it to the third screen, that the next time you open that plugin or plugins will kind of go to that particular screen. So it'll kind of remember its last position. So. All right, so we have KB Ahmed just sending thanks from India. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see drums with Groove Agent. How do you use note repeat? It always works on every drum sound instead of one single sample. All right, so I'll just do just a quick, and it's kind of hard in my setup because it's kind of a smaller keyboard, but we'll see if we could show. And this is found in the full version of Groove Agent and not in SE. Okay, so I don't have the best MIDI controller for this, but if we go to the Perform tab here and we activate note repeat, we can see that, you know, once I play this particular pitch here, so let's say, okay, so I'm going to play, I'm just going to see if I can get this going on my small MIDI controller I have on my desk. All right, so now when I come over here, I could say, okay, so I play, you play the note that you want it to do the repeat on. So I could come over here and let's say, so I hold down the pitch that I want to sample, and then I just play the particular note in real time here that we want to do the repeat with. So I'll come here. So it's when you kind of use so just kind of setting up your MIDI note range to do that. So okay, just reading through questions. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, so we just see from JVI says Groove Agent Phil's follow-up SE versus not SE kit. Thanks. Can't find a non-SE kit of this drum, which I find strange. So a lot of the content was developed so that it could work in SE as well. So it's not so crippled. So a lot of people don't really realize that distinction. That that the full version has more patterns because the normal kits have a number of patterns as well. You see that Gareth's daughter is happy. So with the pizza night is the question. So we just see, I think this is with our click track renders audio. Sorry, I meant it. Like regulate the click volume on the fly as an Ableton. Is it possible to do it in Cubase? Maybe creating a dedicated channel in the mixer. So, we just kind of did that in the mixer. Another area that you could do is, let's say, if we have the click on. So let's say we're here, we have the click on, is if you go to the control room volume, you could adjust the click level kind of right here. So let's say I'm here. So that's where you could attenuate the volume of the click as well. But, you know, just see if you, you know, if the rendering the click does the trick. Okay, so you see a question from John Costigan. Greg, do you routinely lightly compress your bass when recording or only after printing the sound? I generally, you know, like all the recordings I did for the Hot Mess project with Gareth, Michael Teams, and Pablo, I didn't do any compression on the way in at all. So Gareth may have done some compression in context of the mix, but I sometimes don't like the sound of a lot of compression on my bass. So I try to play as consistently as possible level wise so that no one has to slap a compressor on me because I was, you know, not, you know, as diligent with dynamics as possible. So I try to get all that sound out of my fingers. So I tend not to compress at all. So. All right, so we see a question. When M1 compatible? So I guess when will Cubase be M1 compatible? So it runs on the M1 processors under Rosetta. So, but we'll have to see if there's going to be further stuff coming in the future. I'm sure that there will be. It's an obvious thing, but it's a big undertaking as well. So, but you could definitely run it on your M1 and people are getting great performance already. But realize that many third-party plugins and many audio interfaces perhaps won't work on M1. So, and that's kind of out of our control. All right, so we see from Kaiwen Franklin, do you think Cubase 12 could have some more updated song templates? It's always a possibility if you want to pass on what type of templates you're looking for. We could maybe kind of, you know, it's not the highest, you know, area of focus all the time. So, but, you know, we could definitely, you know, I know that I could create some and pass them along if you let us know exactly kind of what you want. See, Michael Pierce would come to Nashville if Hot Mess was playing. So. All right, just reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great questions. My chat field just jumped on me. Okay, seeing some discussion on track presets. Okay, so I just see from Lopex, I'm searching for some mix education. So there's all sorts of wonderful stuff on, on online, but there's nothing really better than just kind of, making lots of mistakes. Everyone that's really good at mixing has made a lot of mistakes, and you just kind of get to figure it out. And try to always, after a while, you get to listen for what is, what's wrong, what's not, and there's all sorts of people, wonderful resources that are available now. Okay, so I'm just saying from Greg Malik. It says, after setting previewing my custom click sounds to a drumstick click wave, after exiting the dialogue, it goes back to electronic sounds. So let's take a look. Okay, so let's say if we go to our click sounds here, make sure that you have use custom sounds selected. So if you wanted to, come over here, but if you kind of load up, I don't think I have any like one shots handy. Let me see if I could find. All right, so let's say I just have snares here. All right, and then, okay, so we get audition to click sound. So now it's just doing the snare samples I just kind of dragged in. So that's what it's using for the basis of the click. So it seemed to be working for me. All right, so we see from Lopex, who's just asking about mix education. You should definitely consider getting Cubase because, that will be a great mixing solution and a great mixing platform that you could grow with. Okay, just going through. Reading through more comments. Let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, we're doing okay. We just had a couple questions we'll get to. Okay, so we just see from Peter Brown saying, I'm waiting for Cubase 12, no dongle. Will all licensing parameters change, Greg? Have you spoken to this as of late? So when you say, so I think all of the Steinberg programs will be moving to the new licensing system. It's not going to be instantaneous, so it's going to be kind of a hybrid approach for, because you may get like Dorico, you may get on the new license system, and then you'd be able to, but if you had Wavelab, it might be later, several months later by the time it's under the new licensing system. All right, so we just see Peter's also mentioning I did receive a heads up in my email yesterday from Steinberg, nothing mentioning Yamaha. Thanks, man. So, Steinberg is an independent brand, so Yamaha owns many different companies, Bosendorfer pianos, Nexo, live sound speakers, Ampeg, Line 6, they're all kind of, in all of those companies are owned by Yamaha as well. So, but we all kind of keep independent brands. All right, wonderful to see David M on the live stream. All right, so we see what versions of Cubase come with Very Audio. So if you're, on Cubase 11, it's going to be Artist and Pro. Prior versions to that, since Cubase 5 was only in the Pro version. So you could have Cubase Artist 11 and Cubase Pro 11 as having Very Audio. All right, so I just see from Best Korean Jesus, glad you could make it. Any tips on organizing sounds in Retrolog, Halion, Groove Agent? Looking for some ideas. So one of the things that I think is kind of underutilized a lot is, let's say if we have, if you find particular sounds that you like, like as I get, go through a plugin, just come over here and use kind of the rating system. So you can say, oh, I really don't like this sound, or I don't like that. That one's amazing. And then when you go to look, you could actually just say, I only want to, like when you're looking for presets, you could come over here and say, I'm only looking for 4-star, or I'm looking for 3-star. So you could actually come over here on the media bay in the right-hand zone or the main media bay and search by the number of stars. So, if you know that you like these particular sounds and you want to come back to it, and, just like as you audition sounds in an instrument, you could just go, okay. At that point, just simply, use the star rating system, and then you could just say, give me all my 5-star sounds, give me all my 4-star sounds. All right, so just see Michael Teams just saying, with the new system, if your internet goes out, so do you. With the dongle, you're still working. So, you will be able to have a system where you only check, there will be kind of an offline mode, Michael Teams, so, that could last up to a year. And if you don't have, an internet connection, you would be able to basically, how the FAQ described it is, you could get a code even from your phone, and then just simply at that point, enter that code in if you don't have internet access. So. And we just see from Greg Malik, why not dongle or internet? So, the under the hood requirements of using the dongle or not would, basically, it's an either or situation. So as we're kind of working with that, there's many calls to the e-licensor dongle that won't be under the new license management system. So that's why they can't kind of do both in parallel. Okay, so we see any idea if Cubase will be complete touchscreen compatible in the next update? Having one partially paralyzed hand, it would help me tremendously. That's why the question of opening on a separate touch screen. So I haven't, I don't know what all the features are in Cubase 12, but, I know that there's lots of people that are, using touch screens, pretty efficiently. But I understand your situation. I'll kind of pass that along as feedback. All right, so we see that Peter Brown just saying that Bosendorfer makes a better piano than Yamaha. So yeah, that's probably why. And I think what was really interesting about the Bosendorfer acquisition is they made sure to keep all of the factories and all of the employees the same, and realize that they're wonderful pianos, and we just want them in the Yamaha portfolio of brands. All right, so we see Sable Winters on the live stream. Thanks for joining. All right, I may be almost caught up, I think. All right, so let me go to a couple of questions that were mailed in. I think we answered one or two already. So let's see if we make sure we don't neglect the people that had sent in questions. Okay, so we have a question. Can you make a sample cut each other off in the sampler track, like MPC style of triggering? I hope that made sense. What's up, Greg? All right, so, we could do this. I think this is probably going to be just like a monophonic mode. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at it, see if I still have... Okay, here's the project. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to go to this particular instrument, and I wanted to, I wanted to, when I play another note, that the first sample is cut off. So how we could do that is you'll see this little M icon, and this will place it into monophonic mode. So as soon as I hit another sample, it just automatically cuts off. Sorry, I have just my record icon button still remapped, but so all you have to do is just make sure that we're in the monophonic mode here. So now as soon as I play another sample, it's only going to play one voice. And then if you want it to also come here and put it into legato mode, like now when I hit without this activated, it's going to play the sample from the beginning of the sample. But if I wanted that to continue, if I hold down the first key, then hit the second key, it will continue to play within the sample from that point. So you could just kind of look at the keys in the bottom. So you could have different monophonic modes like that. All right. All right, so we had a question from Soren. It says, "Can you listen?" It was like to the song by Tribal Society called "Heart Shaped Box." Is there a way to recreate the effect on the singing? I have no clue what's going on with it. Is there a plugin that's needed that I don't have? So. Okay, so and I listened to this track, and it's kind of an interesting track, and I think what it was a simple reverb trick. So let's say if I wanted to go here, and we'll do it on this project here. So let's say I wanted to take this.
We played our records into the night.
So, and it was kind of like this really interesting reverb sound, and it's kind of like a bit of an 80s trick where we could just come over here. So let's say I wanted to take the reverb, and I'm going to just click on this, and we could do this in reverence. It's just a reverse. So this just plays the reverb backwards.
I turn it up, you would you up until now. That was okay. Guess all along I was so naive. Now you're packing boxes, ready to leave.
And you could adjust kind of the pre-delay.
History laid out on the floor. I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. 'Cause now you're asking Beatles or Stones. Something about
So I think that's really like the effect that was going on. So just, within the reverence reverb, all you had to do is just kind of take like your standard room sound. So let's say I'll just make this louder here so you could hear it a little more prominently, and then just reverse that. So that was a very kind of, in the 80s, a lot of people would use it on like snare drums. I think even a really prominent example is the Scorpions track, Rocky Like a Hurricane. I think the third verse, like instead of the big snare hit, it's just, when you hear that kind of sound. So I think all of that particular track was just a reversed reverb. So, and a lot of times it was really hard to do. In the past, people would record to a different tape deck and, re-record it back into the track and, flip the tapes around. But now you could just click on a reverse button inside of Reverence. All right. We have a question. Is there a chance we will have the option to move or delete a track directly from one of the mixer windows? Hopefully in the future. We know it's a long-standing feature request, but a lot of people have kind of migrated, and myself included, where since we have the mix console, a lot of times on the same track that in the lower zone, that to me it hasn't been as necessary, but we understand if you're working in kind of the large mixer screen that it's helpful to be able to simply move a track around. So but it is a long-standing feature request that the developers and product planning people have known about. Okay, so we had a question. As you know, to do a LUFS, this is loudness units, full scale calculations, the time parameter is important coefficient. And if the time is lacking an audio statistics report is not complete, maybe you can forward this request to the development department as a user request, and also request from the great Greg, and tell them why it's very important in a report. So I think what this is getting into is, let's say if we look at a particular audio file here and we go to the statistics that we can get kind of like, you know, I'll just select this particular audio file, and then we can see what our kind of our maximum and momentary loudness is. And this would be kind of for the whole file. And as we work with that, but we also have kind of more dynamic metering here. So in Nuendo, there is what they call a loudness track. I don't think it really, you know, and I think the intention here is to be aware of these, you know, of the where you're sitting on the loudness overall, so that when you deliver it, that, you know, it's not going to get processed unnecessarily by a playback provider, whether it's going to be something like Spotify or you know, or for broadcast, because they have different loudness unit levels that are employed. So, but I'll definitely pass that along as a feature suggestion again. All right, I think that's all the mailed in questions. We got a couple of them throughout the live stream as well. So that when you deliver, all right, sorry about that. You know, just mute that. Open up the wrong window. Okay, so just see, hello Greg, was that bass? Let's see, was that Clean Music Man bass you showed a stock plugin in SE3 or third-party plugin? Thanks. That's a Steinberg instrument. It's sold separately. It's just called Electric Bass, and it's also available in the Absolute 5 collection. So, but it's a wonderful instrument. So we just see from Hello World, hello Greg, is there a way to use Groove Agent in double time while in style mode without changing the entire project tempo? Okay, so let's say if I'm here, I'm in Groove Agent. All right, so let's say if I just come over here and I go to the pattern and we go to edit. So, you know, some of the patterns will have, depending on the programming, but a lot of the patterns, let me just switch to, so depending on the kit itself, let's see if this one has. So let's say while we're, all right, so just trying to think if there's a, so a lot of them will have like a halftime feel. But, you know, one thing that you could do, like on just even on a project window, is let's say if I take this, you know, I drag a pattern out. So if I switch my sizing mode here to sizing applies time stretch, we could also just apply the time stretch. So let's say now we'll just listen to this pattern here. So you could just kind of time compress the files if you want. So let's say, you know, we'll take this pattern here, even if it's on the project window. And now I could just say, okay, we're just going to time compress the MIDI, and then so, but you know, that's might be the easiest way to do it. But you know, some of them will have kind of a halftime mode as well. So maybe if you start it and put it in halftime mode and then switch it out of halftime mode, that may work as well. All right, so we have Edward Alexander checking in from Puerto Rico. Thanks for joining. Been there a couple times. Got to do some Cubase demos there a number of years ago. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, I also see Black Howell 7 just saying Def Leppard's Photograph used a reversed reverb snare. That's a great example of that. All right. So we see from Jason Sykes. Hi, Greg. I have a keyboard that transmits MIDI as CC or NRPN with totally different results. Can you please explain the difference? So usually the NRPM are non-registered parameters, I think. So that's often more sysx. And that's going to be more specific to the particular instrument. So only controls for that particular instrument, whereas as it's transmitting CC data, that could be used to control, like to, modulation and to have MIDI volume so that could be used as a control for external devices. Or you probably think of the NRPN, and I could be mistaken on this, but I think it's going to be like associated with sysx, and it's going to be kind of proprietary to that particular instrument. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, just kind of reading through more comments. All right, so we just see Michael Pierce just saying he's sneaking all sorts of non-linear reverbs into drums recordings at the moment, and he's loving it, so that's good. All right, so we see Jazz Dude saying we have a couple minutes left, 111 likes. So I think I'm at the end of the discussion. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. We'll see if there's some more questions that kind of sneak in. Let me just check the time. So we have a couple of minutes. And if not, we will wrap up. And it's great to see everyone. We'll be doing this again on Tuesday of next week, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. I think that we're all kind of on the daylight saving times, all kind of matched up now in most markets. All right, so with that, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up and look forward to seeing everyone on Tuesday. Everyone have a wonderful weekend and stay safe and healthy. And look forward to catching up with everyone on next week's live stream. Thank you very much.